Hello everyone, Simon here. Welcome back to Minecraft Design School. Haven't had one of these in a while, so whenever somebody submits their Minecraft builds to me, I can have a design analysis of it and answer questions if you have questions for me. So today we have ChunkWorld by Noodlor. Let's go straight in and get some initial impressions before we read the intro and then have a look at the buildings. So, curiously, we start in the air, and also we have buildings without context. So, I guess I should say something about this before we start. Noodlor has probably, without realizing it, Noodlor has stumbled into one of the great debates in architecture theory of the last century, and that is whether buildings make sense without context. Because in the real world, there's always context, right? Buildings always exist in the world, in the ground, in the landscape, in the cities. And so, in the real world, everything always has context, and you can't really build buildings without context. But let's say we take as an analogy, you take an animal out of the wild and put it in a zoo. Does that animal still make sense in the zoo? And you can argue that it doesn't, especially for animals like you take a polar bear. You put a polar bear in a zoo. Is it still a polar bear? I mean, yeah, of course, it's still a polar bear, but it's not walking around on the Arctic ice. It's not hunting seals. It's not swimming in the ocean. So it's no longer doing any polar bear things once you take it out of the water or take it out of the Arctic and put it in a zoo. So here we have buildings taken out of whatever context, or they were never put into context in the first place. They were built in this kind of grid with no context, and then the question is like, what kind of sense do they make when you take them out of their context like this? Interesting question with real consequences, because in the early part of the last century, from the 20s until about the 50s, the big thing was modernism and the international style, which you could probably find an example. So the international style is something like these two buildings here, right? Similar. So if you look at the skylines of New York, of Tokyo, of Hong Kong, Singapore, parts of London, Sydney, just look at any kind of big city, big modern city. The skylines look very similar, and the skyscrapers look very similar, like steel and glass and concrete skyscrapers. And so, and they call it the international style because that's what it is. It's the international style. It is the style that just fits into any city anywhere, and you have a modern city that looks like it has buildings like this, right? But then, is that good? Is that bad? Because if you are, for example, if you go to Japan, if you go to Tokyo, the food is different, the language is different, the culture is different, but the buildings are the same. Why would that be? Like, why would that make sense? So the counter argument from the 60s onwards, the counter argument to the international style was that when you do that, you are erasing the local culture. You are denying the local culture. You are denying the ability of the local people to express themselves through their architecture. So if you look at other examples, so this is vaguely Middle Eastern, right? And then this is vaguely Nordic, and there are some other vaguely ethnic things, vaguely cultural things. It's like some sort of Asian pagoda, could be Japanese, could be Chinese. This looks kind of Chinese. So if you look at kind of historic architecture before modernism, different parts of the world will have different styles of architecture. And the styles of architecture tell us something about the culture, something about the history, something about the technologies that they develop, something about the economies of those places. And so a lot of information, a lot of detail, and a lot of culture is lost when you make everything look the same all around the world. And so the debate is ongoing, right? I mean, it's still today. The debate is still not settled because you can say, well, the world is increasingly globalized, right? You go on the internet, and the whole world is right there on Twitter, on Facebook, on Google. And so if the whole world is increasingly globalized in the sense that everybody is closer together than ever before in terms of ideas, then why wouldn't the architecture converge, right? It only reflects the reality of the fact that globalization is becoming more and more a thing. But then the counter argument remains that when you make everything the same, you lose variety and you lose um, identity and you lose cultures, and that is a cost to the world in terms of less interesting and less variety. Yeah, so the debate remains. And so Noodlor, I think, has stumbled into this argument unwittingly by taking all these buildings out of their context and putting them basically in a zoo. This is basically a zoo of buildings. And zoos themselves are controversial, right? When you, as I said, when you put a polar bear, take a polar bear out of the Arctic, put it in the San Diego Zoo. What is a polar bear doing in San Diego? In a way, it doesn't really make sense. I mean, it makes sense that okay, so kids want to go to the zoo and see animals. All right, fine. It's an educational thing, and there is educational value. But does it really have much educational value if the polar bear in San Diego doesn't live like a polar bear? And in fact, the funny thing is when you take a polar bear and put it in a zoo, you get algae growing on their fur because the temperature is too high. so they turn green, which is kind of funny and kind of tragic. So the polar bears turn green because the algae it's too hot. So it's too warm and too humid, and so then the algae just kind of grows on their fur. So it's a form of torture for the animal, to be honest. Like when you take them, like an animal that travels all around the Arctic Circle, you take that and you put them into a tiny little enclosure with a tiny little pool, and they don't get to hunt seals anymore. Like the natural, I'm spending a lot of time talking about polar bears, but it's not. In a way, it's not right. And so when you take buildings and you put them in a zoo like this, in a way, it's not right because there's no context. There's like if I don't know where you guys live. Let's say you live in Australia. Let's say you live in Melbourne or Sydney or whatever. Let's say you live in Melbourne. We take your house. We put it in Siberia. Does that make any sense? So and you walk out your front door and suddenly Siberia is snowing. I mean, maybe you like snow. Maybe you think that's a great idea. But it doesn't make sense. It doesn't really make sense, does it? It doesn't. Or if we like take your house and we put you in Dubai and it's like the desert. Well, I mean, Australia is kind of desert anyway, so maybe it doesn't make any difference. But yeah, there's just the idea of taking a building out of context. Does that make sense? Anyway, so that is one of the great philosophical and theoretical debates in architecture in the past century, because globalization really is in the past century. And Noodlor just walked right into it without knowing. Also, Noodlor started up in the air. So the idea that you start up in the air is already odd, because this is contextless, because nobody in the real world flies in the air. So this is a position that nobody ever inhabits, right? If you design a house and you give this view to your client, you are in a way lying to them, because the client does not have the ability to levitate in the air. So they'll never see their house from this position unless they're in a helicopter or something, or they're like flying a drone. So and that also is an issue, because some of these modernist architecture, this like some of these modern buildings, they look good from a certain angle. So the famous one is Falling Water. Hold on, how do I type? Falling Water is the name of the oh crap, how do I turn anyway. I just put the inventory on. So Falling Water is one of these buildings. It's a famous example where the best view of that house is from in the water, which is weird. So it's a water next to a water. It's a building next to a waterfall, and there's like a lake So the most impressive view of the house is if you're standing in the lake, looking up at the house next to the waterfall. You take a photo of that. And that's the photo that everybody sees. But it's also the view that nobody ever experiences because you have to stand in the water to see it. And who's gonna just walk into the water to look at your house? And nobody does that in real life, right? So it's one of these deceptive architectural practices where you are in the water. You are in the water. You're showing people a view that you never see. And Noodlor, if I may, when you do this, when you give me this as the starting view, you are doing the same thing. You are in a way deceiving people. This is Minecraft. You creative mode, you're in Minecraft. These are models anyway, so there's no context. All right, fine. So in this, you're allowed to do this here, but in a way, you are deceiving people because nobody ever floats in the air to look at buildings. When have you ever done that? I've never done that. When you look at buildings, you're always standing on the ground because gravity, and so you're looking at buildings from the perspective of a person. You're looking at buildings from here, and so when I judge buildings or when I kind of assess buildings and when I kind of think about buildings, I always have to take this view because this is the view that's relevant, the view of someone standing on the ground. So the idea of having no context and then being up in the air and so all that, it removes architecture from any semblance of reality and puts them in this abstract place. And I mean, this is an abstract place because it's just, a grid. So you kind of remove all semblance of reality and put it into this abstract space. And then you ask me to assess the architecture in this abstract space. And it's just like taking the polar bear out of the Arctic and put it in the zoo. And so you're asking me to look at the polar bear and tell you about the polar bear. But I can't tell you about the polar bear because I can't tell you what it does in the wild. Just as I can't really tell you everything there is to say about these buildings because you've taken them out of their environments. All right, I think I've spent enough talking about that. So that's just one of the big debates. And I can just go on and on and on. I can just start dropping names of people who are on both sides of the debate, and I won't do that, but fascinating stuff. So modernism, postmodernism. So those are the two opposing concepts that you might want to look up in terms of architecture, modernist architecture and postmodernist architecture, and why they did things the way they did. All right, so let's go read what Noodlor says to me. Noodlor says, "Hello, Simon. All right. This started off as a creative outlet where I built a variety of miniature structures in various styles, similar to what you do in a sketchbook." So this clarifies, right, what Noodlor wants to do is a sketchbook, which is fine. I mean, there's nothing wrong with the sketchbook. The project gained popularity, and through various iterations and additions, I ended up with 64 buildings. All right. I'm happy with the overall collection for now in general, but I'd appreciate a fresh point of view and informed opinion on the following points. Nomenclature, my goal is to keep everything short, yet descriptive and memorable. Informed opinions on architectural styles and aesthetics are welcome here. Well, if you want to do that, you mostly just go to Google and type it in. So we'll see. In my opinion, you don't usually need an expert for that. You need to just type words into Google and look things up. But maybe there are some things that I know about that other people don't. So maybe like what to Google is maybe things that you want to know about. Interior decoration. How can I decorate the interior of some small buildings without cluttering them? Or am I better off leaving some rooms empty and without distraction? Well, in Minecraft, everything is blocky. So it's very difficult to make furniture in Minecraft because everything's too blocky and too big. So that's not it's less of an architecture problem and more of a Minecraft problem, if that makes sense. General impression, as vague as this last point is, unfiltered feedback is always helpful to some degree. You might notice things I overlook, etc. Alright, so not that many questions, which I'm not sure if that's a good sign or a bad sign. Sometimes it's a bad sign because sometimes when a student doesn't have questions, it means they haven't quite thought about it enough. Like they don't know what to ask because they haven't really thought about what they're doing. But sometimes it means that they just know, and they don't need to ask. So it could be good or could be bad. We don't know yet. All right, so I guess we should just start and just look at each of them. They all have signs, I think. Should we look at it? Well, it's almost daytime anyway. Desert temple. See, what does that mean? What does that mean? I can't open a browser in here. So a desert temple is not a thing that exists in the real world. I guess that there are temples in the desert, mostly Egyptian, but other African, sub-Saharan cultures. But they don't build in this style. This style is Greek. Like this is Greek. Oh yeah. Okay, no, this is whack. This is completely whack. Well, if you're trying to make something real, it's completely whack. If you're trying to make something fictional, then maybe we can kind of tolerate it. So this is a Greek style. The thing about Greek temples that it might not be obvious to people who haven't studied architecture, but Greek temples are in essence marble models of wooden temples. Isn't that interesting? So all the detailing in Greek temples, they're not marble detailing. I mean, they're detailing made in marble, but the detailing doesn't describe a marble building. The detailing describes a wooden building. And you can look this up in Wikipedia too. So the columns, there's like fluted columns, and so like, I mean, why have fluted columns? So why the columns aren't just square or circular? Why are they fluted? It's because it's hypothesized that they're either logs or they're bundles of reeds, is what they're supposed to be. And then at the top, there's a cap at the bottom of the column. There's a little kind of flat piece of stone that it sits on, and then at the top there's also a cap, and then there's a capital above that. So why is that? It's because if the column was wood, you need to sit the thing above the ground, because wood is like straws, if you don't know. So the wood fibers, because in a real tree, water gets drawn up from the roots and it gets evaporated in the leaves, and so the trunk of the tree is like straws, and it just pulls water up by itself, because that's how it is, like, because a tree needs to pull water out of the ground, right? So if you sit a log on the ground, the water would just go up the log, gets pulled up into the log, and the log will rot because there's water in it. So you need to make a wooden column last, you need to dry it out so it doesn't rot, and then you have to keep it dry by not sitting it on the ground. And so you sit it on a piece of stone above the ground so that the water doesn't just start drawing up into the straws inside the log, right? And so the columns in the Greek temple, they look like that because it's a model of a wooden column. And then the capital, and then the frieze, and then the what's it called? The stuff at the top, I forgot anyway, so the stuff above the beams above the columns, and then the detailing in that beam is like a wooden building. So it implies there's wooden beams inside, but there's stone beams in the actual marble temples. So anyway, so if you look at all the detailing in a Greek temple, it implies that it's a wooden structure, or it's the shape of a wooden structure built in a stone. And so it implies that Greek temples, the marble temples that we see today, evolved out of earlier wooden temples. So they started with wooden temples, and then as they moved on to building in stone, they copied the wooden temples in the new stone temples. That's what the Greek temples are. And so this doesn't make sense, because if it's supposed to be a desert temple, there's not going to be wooden temples in the desert because there's no trees. right? Because there's no trees in the desert. So, but if you look at and especially like the pointed roof, The pointed roof doesn't make any sense in the desert because it doesn't rain in the desert, so you don't need a pointed. So the sloping roof is to make sure that the water slides off the roof and doesn't pool, because you don't want a pool of water on your roof, because then it will leak. So, so even the roof. So if you look at Egyptian temples, they have flat roofs because it never rains because it's a desert. So it doesn't matter if it has a flat roof. And if you look at Egyptian temples, the columns are just smooth cylinders. They're not fluted, and the detailing in the Egyptian temples doesn't look like wood at all, whereas the Greek ones does. So what you've done here, Noodlor, what you've done here is you've taken vaguely Greek detailings and said it's a desert temple. But what makes more sense if you take Egyptian detailing, if you take Egyptian detailing and make that a desert temple, and if you take Egyptian detailing, there's a lot less of this stuff. I mean, even here it's wood. Even here, this is made of wood. But there's less of that stuff in the Egyptian temples, and a lot simpler because Egyptians they don't really have wooden temples to build from. It's just stone all the way. So the detailing is more like stone, whereas this detailing here resembles wooden temples. Right? Right. Does that make? I hope that makes sense. But again, this is what I mean when things don't make sense when you take them out of context. So when you don't have, like, to understand the Greek temple, you have to understand the context of it. And the Greeks, the funny thing about, well, it's not funny, it's kind of tragic. The tragic thing about the Greek is that Greece has been inhabited and been civilized for so long that if you go to Greece now, there's not that many trees, but there used to be a lot more trees. And so, and the Greeks, they used up all their trees, or it's like the history of Greece implies that over the course of the millennia they used up all their trees, and so there used to be more trees. So like they used to build these warships and they used to build these wooden temples, and it's believed that over time they started running out of trees, and so they switched to building in stone. Whereas in an actual desert temple there wouldn't be trees to copy. Anyway, so yeah, so this is what we mean when things don't make as much sense when you take them out of context. Because to understand Greek architecture, you have to understand the history and understand the context, and you have to understand the landscape. Just as to understand Egyptian temples and desert temples, you have to understand the context and the desert landscape and the desert climate in order to see, well, why does the desert temple have a sloped roof if it never rains? So this doesn't make sense without context. You see what I mean? Let's go inside. Let's go inside. So Noodlor also asked about furniture. I mean, obviously there's not enough space here for furniture, which is fine. This is also odd, having the altar in the middle of the space. This is well, I guess the oracle at Delphi is the great oracle is that building is central, but most religious architectures have an axis, and they're not like centralized like this. They're like longer. They're like a long rectangle rather than a square or a circle. So the in terms of kind of spatial arrangement, when you have a long space, you have a front and a back, and that establishes a hierarchy, and that establishes a movement. You move from the front to the back, and usually the back spaces are the most sacred, right? So you go in the front door, and there's a long hallway, and then at the other end of the hall, it's not a hallway, it's actually a hall. At the end of the hall, there's the statue of the god, and so if it's like the temple of Athena in Athens, then at the end there'll be a giant statue of Athena or a giant statue of Zeus or whoever it is. And because like the long space establishes a hierarchy, and also for various ceremonies, you would kind of progress from the front door down to the end, and then that space is a space where ceremonies happen. And it's a similar thing with churches, I guess. Like you go into a church and there's a long space, and going down, that walking down the space is a part of the experience there. Whereas a centralized thing like this, like, implies there's no real direction. I mean, there's a door there, but having a centralized altar implies that, like, it doesn't really have a direction, which is less common. Oh, is it perpetual night? Why would you have a perpetual night? Alright, never mind, it's perpetual night. Alright, let's move on to the next one. So, old tower. Sure, I mean it's an old tower. Vaguely Gothic. It's Gothic. French, probably French. Gothic tower. Using small stone technology, relying on buttresses to hold off the lateral forces. So relying on buttresses to hold off the sideways forces. A standalone tower is unusual because, look, I mean, tall buildings back in those days, back in the medieval era, which is what this resembles. Old buildings back in the medieval era are expensive and difficult, and so mostly people can't afford them. And really, the only people who could afford them on a reliable basis is churches, and I guess churches or fortresses. So, like, there's money in religion, and there's money in defending yourselves against enemy invasions. So people are willing to spend money on that. And so a tower in the medieval era, a tower like this would either be part of fortifications or part of a church. And again, if you take the tower out of context, it doesn't make any sense, because is this a church tower or is it a defensive tower? It's kind of neither, right? If it's a defensive tower, the windows are too big. If it's a church tower, where are the church bells and where's the church? I can't look. Things only make sense in context. They really do. They really only make sense in context. And when you take pieces of architecture out of context, it really doesn't make much sense. Anyway, let's talk about structure then, because there's buttressing. So this was back in a time when people built really tall buildings using small bits of stone. So if you go to any Gothic cathedral and you look closely at the walls, they're like little pieces of stone piled together into a tall building, which is not easy to do. I mean, you try doing that in your house. Just get small pieces of stone and pile it up high. It falls over very easily. And so part of the answer to that is to have buttresses like this to basically hold the building together and to kind of put weight on this side and put weight on that side, so it kind of pushes it together. So, because the stones will want to, like, slip off and fall down this way, so you kind of have weight on the other side holding them in. It's a delicate balance of mass is what Gothic architecture is. And sometimes it doesn't work, sometimes they fall down. And whenever there's an earthquake, they fall down quite easily because they're not very stable. The main thing is there's no reinforcing, right? So these days, if you build a concrete building, you have steel bars inside the concrete, and that's the reinforcing. And so the steel bars make sure that the concrete doesn't fall apart as easily. Whereas the old Gothic cathedrals and the old Gothic architecture, there's no reinforcing on the inside. It's literally just pieces of stone piled on top of each other. So it's not very stable. And again, so it would imply that this is a church rather than a fortress, because a fortress, you can't afford it to be unstable, because people will be using catapults against your fortress and whatnot. So it's probably a church tower, in which case, again, the question is, where's the church? Alright, let's move on to the next one. What do we have? Classic temple, kind of. The proportions are off. The proportions are off. Classical Greek and Roman temples won't be quite those proportions. Yeah, definitely not those proportions. These proportions are more similar to Southeast Asian temples. Just the proportions, right? Just the like width versus the height of it. It resembles more. And then this sort of thing that the Greeks were quite obsessive, you might say, about their proportions. They were quite particular about the uh, the measurements of things. And I'm not too sure it's no, it's not. It's not quite classical. It's not quite classical. It's very particular. Like Greek and Roman architecture, it's like you really have to get a feel or actually kind of know the geometries and the proportions. Because otherwise it doesn't feel right. Just looking at that doesn't feel right. The proportions just don't feel right. Again, a centralized thing. The thing is, when you have a square, see, this is another consequences of having no context. When you don't have a context and you have a square, the natural inclination is to have a centralized design because there's no. So when you have no context, the only thing you work from is the square, and therefore the center of the square just becomes the natural anchor point of your building. And you can see that so far there's three buildings and they all anchor in the middle. And in fact, a lot of them anchor in the middle. And that's because there's no context. If there were context, so if the left side there's something else there, if the right side there's something else there, and the back side there's something else there, then those things would start to define your building in a way. Like, for example, if there's a cliff behind the building, then you would sit the building against the cliff, maybe, right? And then there'll be a front and a back. Whereas when you work in an environment where there's no context, there's no front, there's no back. I mean, you define that this is the front, but the front and the back are the same in terms of the context. So again, like working without context, I understand that Noodlor says, well, this is like a sketchbook, and a sketchbook has no context, which is fine. I mean, again, alright, sketches are fine. But I don't know, I really don't think architecture makes any sense if you don't look at the context. Alright, let's keep moving. Proportions are off. If you just go to Google, just type in classical architecture and look at those proportions. Proportions matter a lot if you're talking about classical architecture. This is a vaguely Northern European house. Medieval house. I'm not sure about that. I'm not sure if it is medieval. You have to remember that medieval times were not wealthy times. This house seems a little too fancy for medieval times. It feels later than that. It feels more like a later era. Let's see the interior. So this is the sort of this a ladder. There's no staircase. Haha! You can't fit a staircase in a space this small. So this house is far too small on the inside for. In fact, it's just too small, isn't it? How big is it? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 meters. Let's see, 2, 3, 4. Well, yeah, okay. Well, in the real world, you can fit like 2 rooms in here. Unfortunately, in Minecraft, the walls are 1 meter thick, and so you can't in Minecraft. Ladder is whack. You can't fit furniture in here. I mean, in the real world, you would. You might fit a couple of chairs or something, like a chair and a couple of chairs. I think you can put a chairs and table in here. Maybe chairs and tables, or like a couple of chairs on the other side. I think you can do a little bit of furniture, but it will have to be quite minimalist. Same here, maybe a couple of beds or something. You can do that. But you won't manage very much of it. This is the chimney? The ladder is in the chimney. Okay. What I want to see is you try to fit a staircase in here. Because you'll find that quite difficult. Have you tried that? Trying to put a staircase in here? That would be so interesting and also probably completely mess up your space. Oh, the ladder's in the chimney, so everything is whack. Medieval house. Yeah, no, I don't know. I think the problem with the medieval era is that everybody it's been conflated with fantasy, right? The like fantasy medieval versus real medieval is two very different things. Like if you go to like a Renaissance fair, if you go to a Renaissance festival, it's nothing like the actual Renaissance. Like people dress up and they joust and all that, and they eat pies or whatever it is they do at Renaissance fairs. That's nothing like the real Renaissance. You realize that, right? And so this building is like a Renaissance fair house more than an actual Renaissance house. um, so yeah, maybe instead of like medieval house, I would say medieval fantasy house is more like it. Yeah, people idealize that time. And it's not surprising because the people at the time also idealized that time. Like the literature at the time idealized themselves. Like, King Arthur. King Arthur is, I mean, it's a cool story, bro, but that's not how things really were. It's not really how, like, the reality is somewhat more brutal and somewhat less hygienic, right? The really medieval era in real life is that, no, it has not changing the time, alright. Wait, but the sky is lighter than before, isn't it? I don't know what's going on. What else can I say? Not much really. It's as a modern, preserved, vaguely historic house from maybe the 17 or 1800s, this would work. This is not medieval. Medieval is older than this. It's older than this. Let me just say that. Maybe it's just the label. I think it's just the label. If you change the label to something else, this will be fine. That's not quite what medieval houses look like. Unless you're really rich. Maybe if you're really wealthy, you can do that in the medieval era. Brutalist office. Alright. Yeah, okay, yeah, cool. It's quite brutalist. I see it. So brutalism, I think brutalism is not what they call themselves. Brutalism is a particular form of modernism that has a lot of concrete. That's pretty much what brutalism is. Is concrete and square shapes. Brutalism is, as I said, I mean, the architects didn't call themselves brutalists, but other people call them brutalist. It's, I mean, it's just concrete. It's just a lot of concrete, is what it is. I don't really agree with the naming of it, calling it brutalism. But it's massive concrete, is what it is. Again, the lack of staircases. You've chosen a small footprint, and you can't fit staircases into the small footprint. I understand. So this building is way smaller than it should be, right? An actual building. This is like a toy version of a skyscraper or something. It is. It's like a toy version of a office block. An actual office block would have to be, like, if you just try to think of this in real size. So the scale of this is completely off. Scale of that compared to the scale of those things is completely off. And you've gotten to this point because you restricted yourself to this footprint. And so this is a toy now. So the scale, look at that. That is a house, and then that is a office block, which doesn't make any sense because they're different scales. So to make this a proper scale, you're going to have to make this at least 4 times as big. Twice as tall, twice as wide, at least, in order for this to make sense. Anyway, brutalism, alright, good. It's not difficult to do. Although, actually, no. How does that work structurally? It doesn't work structurally. That doesn't work structurally. You have concrete sitting on glass. Or the concrete is cantilevered out on it. No, this doesn't work structurally there. This other stuff, like you have columns holding up the wall there, that works there. That works there. This part doesn't quite work structurally. What might happen is the column might be on the inside. And so from the outside, you don't really see what's holding it up. Let me just mess around a little bit with this and just kind of mess up your architecture, if you don't mind. So if you want to make it seem like there's horizontal bits in your architecture, what you might actually do is put the column in here, like this, or something. And so from the outside, you have those horizontal lines. So you look at it from the outside, oh, you're like, oh wow, here are horizontal lines, that's cool. So then, but then the structure is on the inside, is behind those horizontal lines. But you can't have concrete sitting on glass. That doesn't work. The glass will just break because the concrete's too heavy. And so what you need is the concrete column holding up the concrete bits. But then if you put it behind it, then from the outside, it just looks like it's a horizontal concrete, when in fact there's columns behind it. So that's how you would do that. If you wanted to look like that on the outside, but you still have it structurally plausible, you have to do that on the inside. All right, that's brutalism. That's decent. Is that Paris, or is that somewhere Europe? Town shop. Yeah, but what town? What town? Whose town? It could either be somewhere in continental Europe, or it could be a Chinese copy of a continental Europe town. The Chinese people do that nowadays. It's kind of weird that like they build these thematic towns, but it's not a theme park. People actually live there, but they have like these thematic villages where people can kind of buy houses and live, which is kind of funny if you look them up. I guess same thing has happened in the Middle East. Is it Dubai that has those islands, so artificial islands with kind of interesting themes? So this is it's either an actual European multi-purpose. So is there like a shop down the bottom and then houses at the top? Town shop. It says it's a shop, or it could be a Chinese copy of it. Who knows? And I say it might be a Chinese copy of it because it's so bright, it's so pink. So because the Chinese versions, it's basically like a theme park except they're serious and people actually live there. So then it's a little bit over the top, it's a little bit too colorful, and it's a little bit too decorated. So it feels like a Disney-fied version of a European town. All right, so here you've tried to put in a staircase. I appreciate you trying to put in the staircase. It's I understand that you don't have much space. Why is it so wait? Why is it so tall? Why are the floor to ceilings so tall here? That doesn't make any sense. There, the floor to ceilings are tall because in some office buildings you want an impressive entrance to impress people who walk into your office. This floor to ceiling is way too tall. Why is this floor to ceiling so tall? Because you started from the facade. You built the facade first. No, but even if you started from the facade, the floor to ceiling the ceiling should be there at most. 4-meter floor to ceiling is huge. This is a little bit crazy. The ceiling should be at, oh crap. The ceiling should be at that level at most. The thing is, empty space doesn't do anything for you. So, because every building costs money, right? So when you have empty space, you are paying money for something that you can't use because you can't use empty space. So floor to ceiling should really be functional, but no more than that. So 3-meter floor to ceiling is usually sensible. This is a little bit ridiculous, and the ridiculousness is reflected in the length of your staircase there. Again, ridiculous floor to ceilings. I'm not sure why you chose to do that. It doesn't actually make any sense to have that high floor to ceiling. Why? I mean, your buildings are already small in terms of footprint. Why did you choose to make them that tall? So this floor to ceiling is... So these proportions are more sensible? 3 meters tall here. That's the wackiest thing. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 meters floor to ceiling. Think about that. That's a double height space, is basically what that is. You can fit an extra floor in every floor, is what you've done. Which even the door doesn't make sense, because that's a 2-meter high door. So what? No, that's just crazy. Why would you do that? Why would you make your floor to ceilings that high? I don't understand. Oh, I get it. I get it. You made the facade first, is what you did. But the facade is out of scale as well. The facade is at the wrong scale. You made the windows first. I get it. Okay, you made the windows look like windows. But the problem with windows in Minecraft is that everything is 1 meter wide, and so the bits in between your windows are 1 meter wide, which is whack because everything is giant and blocky. And then you try to fit in the building behind the windows, and everything's just way too big. Okay. Well, there you go. There's your problem. I think you could have... No, I think you could have done it. I think you could have made it something more sensible. No, I think you could squeeze that down by 1 block, squeeze that down by 1 block. No, I think you could have done it in a way that doesn't have the really crazy floor-to-ceiling heights. Anyway, so this building only makes sense outside here. Even the side, like tiny little side windows don't make any sense. And then nothing else makes sense. Everything else is in the wrong proportions and at the wrong scale. Only the front makes sense. Again, you have these massive floor-to-ceilings. Old town building, but what town? Where is this? You keep doing it. Just there's no context. Not even in the names are there any context. Like, what town is this? This is vaguely Italian. It's vaguely Italian, but again, you're not sure. It could be in China. And the climate does make a difference too. Like the idea that, so for example, like this, everything is enclosed, whereas the bottom is open. So in a hotter climate, you would want your buildings to be more open, so you have more air circulation. So this is more of a Mediterranean climate building versus this, which is more of a continental Europe climate building. So that's why I say it's Italian, because Italy is a Mediterranean climate, where it's hotter and more humid. Oh, staircases, good. You managed to put in staircases. Nice. Alright, so the floor to ceilings are still kind of whack, but not quite as crazy as the last one. This is nice. This is nice, although the staircases are way too big. But again, that's not your fault, that's Minecraft, right? Floating piece of glowstone. Not sure if that makes any sense. There is such a thing as structural glass, but it's not as structural as people assume. Structural glass usually means that it's well, you can look it up in Google. Just type structural glass in Google. It's not structure in the sense that it holds up the building, but it's structure in the sense that you can have a glass facade that is all glass. It's just glass that holds itself together. But you can't hold up the whole building. Usually you just hold up the wall. Alright, so vaguely Italian. And then here we're going into the bungalows. Actually, no, there's one more on this side. Never mind. Fantasy medieval castle. Medieval keep. Again, I say fantasy medieval keep, and you say medieval keep. So, Noodlor, I think you have a... I think you're failing to separate between real architecture and fantasy architecture. I don't know, maybe in your mind this is all fantasy architecture. Maybe you don't None of this is meant to be real. But like I've studied architecture history, and so whenever I look at things, I have to differentiate between something that is actually based on history and things that are not based on history. So this is not entirely based on history. Again, if it's meant to be based on history, the proportions are wrong. It's a little too tall and not quite wide enough. If it's meant to be based on history, but if it is a fantasy medieval keep, then whatever, it doesn't really matter. We're back to the ladders. Stone on the outside, wood on the inside. Yeah, this is reasonable. This is reasonable. Maybe the walls are not thick enough. Again, the medieval keep, what you have to defend against is catapults. And so fortresses have to have really thick walls if they're real fortresses. Because catapults. Alright, so this I would say is a fantasy medieval keep. Oh no, put that away. And there would be a moat, I think, if it was real. Because moats are quite useful. But you don't have space for a moat. I mean, I understand you don't have space for a moat. Alright, let's keep moving. Renaissance Italian tower, kind of. Not sure about the overhang. Really not sure about the overhang. Medieval tower. You don't know your concept of the medieval is not the history book concept of the medieval. It's possible, but why? What would this be for? What would this be for? Is it part of the city walls? Is it again the lack of context doesn't? The lack of context means that I can't explain this. Stairs go up, stairs go down. I can't explain it. Medieval tower, but it's not really a medieval tower. It's more like a video game, Skyrim, or Oblivion tower. It's a fantasy medieval tower. It's not real. It really isn't. Which again, you might be perfectly fine with that. Maybe in your mind you're thinking that it's just a fantasy medieval tower. But for someone like me who has studied architecture history, it's even the word medieval means more than it does to others, maybe. Bungalow. Suburb number 1. Bungalow. Well, it's not really a bungalow because it's got 2 stories. Suburban house. Alright, that's fine. Suburban house is fairly familiar to most of us, so I don't think I need to explain very much about it. Well, there's a certain American ideal, well, maybe it's more like a British ideal that got transplanted into the Americas. The idea that you have your own house in a plot of land it's a British ideal. Like the idea that in order to be a freeman, a free person, you need a house and land. And so you can farm the land to feed yourself. And that is economic freedom back before industrialization, right? So before the industrial era, freedom is having your own house on your own piece of land that you can farm to feed yourself. And so then you're not dependent. You're not dependent on farming other people's land and then having to pay taxes, for example. So if you don't have your own land, you're farming someone else's land, you have to pay taxes, then you're like a peasant, you're a serf. S-E-R-F, serf. Serf? S-E-R-F, serf. Serf is a Russian term, but you're kind of a slave pretty much because you most of what you grow you have to pay for the rent of the land that you're growing the stuff on. That's not very cool. So owning your own land and your own house, and so this ideal got transplanted into the Americas. Obviously, the U.S. is much bigger than the U.K. And so when the British kind of went over to the United States, there's a lot more land, and so the idea that each person or each family could have their own piece of land became easier to do. Whereas in the UK, because there's not enough land, people can't really have their own land. Like if you look at kind of houses in the UK, they're a lot higher density and the gardens are small. So in the US, there was more space for this suburban ideal to be realized in everybody having their own house and having their own garden. And in the early history of the US, this was hey, the homesteading. Homesteading was the idea that you get a piece of land, you farm it, and then you became a free person because you fed yourself and you were self-reliant. These days, people still like having their own house on their own piece of land, but the farming part has kind of dropped away because nobody farms for a living anymore. Who farms? So some people farm for a living, but usually in tractors. So nobody farms to feed themselves anymore because everybody works at a job somewhere. But the idea of the standalone house is still something that people seem to want, although, from a practical point of view, there's no reason why this is any better than, say, apartments. But yeah, people just like the idea of having your own piece of land. Even as populations continue to grow and this becomes less and less viable. I think you can fit some furniture in there. I think you can. A little bit. What do you have here? Nippon Dojo. Japanese, sure. Oh, that's close enough. A dojo? Are you sure this is a dojo? Well, I mean, it's not really big enough. I mean, the exterior shape of it is vaguely Japanese, which is fine. The interior is not a dojo because it's just one room. All right, well, it looks kind of plausible from the outside. Yep, plausible. But I don't. Again, like you, it looks plausible. So as a sketchbook, sure, it's plausible. But the context is gone, and the interior doesn't function. So it's like a toy. It's a toy. It's toy architecture. It's not real architecture. If that, I mean, it's not. I mean, the look of it is fine, but it doesn't function, right? Because again, it's too small and it does out of context. Which is again is I mean I'm saying this, but it's not really criticism because Noodlor is not making things that function. Noodlor is making things that look interesting. It's a sketchbook. It's not actual buildings. But as someone who's trained in architecture, I just keep thinking, well, it doesn't function because like I can't escape thinking there because I've been trained to make things that actually function. Is this meant to be Chinese? Imperial pagoda, but which empire? Whose empire? There's a lot of empires in the world. No, no, seriously, which empire? Japanese? Chinese? Korean? One of the South Asians? Could be anyone. Who knows? And pagodas? Yeah, alright, well, it's vaguely Chinese. Is it the wrong number? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's kind of the wrong number. Numbers Look, the Asian people are superstitious, and numbers matter. I don't think 5 is a good number. What are good numbers? 8? 12? Yeah, not sure about 5 though. Is 5 okay? I don't think 5 is okay. I think 8 is better. Anyway, numbers matter. So again, like it's vaguely Chinese, but then there also seems to be missing things like the numbers seem wrong, and like whose empire. Like this sort of vague stuff. You can get away with vague stuff with people who haven't studied architecture history, right? like people who haven't actually studied architecture history. You tell them something vague like a medieval tower, they're like, okay, medieval tower, it looks like it, sure. But you can't get away with vague stuff when you talk to someone who actually has studied architecture history, because they know what's going on, and then they know that there's missing information here. What's that? A barn? It's a barn. Barns are they can be for storage or they can be for animals. What type of barn is this? It's for storage. It's for hay storage. Okay, fine. Again, I think the floor to ceilings are a little too high. In fact, the proportions are off. Yeah, it's a little too high, a little too short. But again, you're limited by the your footprint you've chosen. So the scale is a bit off. A little too tall? Yeah, the floor to ceiling is a little too tall, and then the footprint's a little too small in terms of proportions. Otherwise, all the pieces are there. I mean, barns aren't that complicated. Nordic temple. Yes, Nordic meat hall. I don't know if it's a meat hall. I don't. Meat halls aren't. I'm not sure if meat hall. It's Nordic. It's a Nordic structure. The interior is no in the meat hall. Hold on. Let me just go to the internet here for this one. No, it's just yeah. No, a meat hall is not that shape. Not historic ones, anyway. Although when you type in meat hall, most of it is from video games. Most of it is from Skyrim. There's not that many historic ones. No, a meat hall is not quite that shape. A meat hall is not quite this shape, but again, you've chosen the square footprint, and therefore you can't afford to make it a proper shape. I don't know. I don't know if I should let you get away with this. Like if you just say Nordic building and you don't specify a meat, if you didn't specify a meat hall, I might let you get away with it. But you've specified meat hall, and it's not quite this shape, is it? Let me just keep scrolling. Yeah, no. No, 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 no. No, it's not. It's not. Meat hall isn't this. It's longer. It's more rectangular. It's like it's a hall. It's an actual hall. All right. Let's start looking at the internet. I mean, the detailing and the shape of it is kind of correct. Not the footprint though. Uh, nope, nope, not gonna let you get away with that one. That's not quite the right footprint. Uh, Aladdin, fantasy fantasy Middle Eastern, Oriental Mosque. Nope, no, the colors are wrong. It's blues and greens. What's with the pink? Wait a minute. What? It's white and blues. I mean, sometimes there are red mosques, but not like that. Yeah, blues, more blues. If you change those colors to blues, then I would kind of believe you. Mosque, yeah, I just typed in mosque in Google image search. No, this is Aladdin. Also, do you have a dome? Kind of. Yeah, I think the dome should be bigger. And and I'm not sure about. No, dome should be bigger. Not sure about this little stuff here. And not pink. We go with blue and not pink. This. Look, this is more like a Disneyland mosque than an actual mosque. Which, given that you've made a zoo out of architecture, I guess a Disneyland mosque is not surprising. No, this is Disneyland. This is not a real mosque. And there should be more towers. The towers, the minarets are significant. There should be 4 minarets. The minarets of a mosque, they're not trivial things. They're significant. They have meaning. No, it's 4. There should be 4 minarets. Maybe 6. At least 4 at the corners. No, this is whoa. You can't. No, you can't do this. You can't. Especially because it's someone else's religion. This is how you. No, you can't do this. Nope. Nope. You can't do this. Or you can. You can't do this unless you do it right. Right. There should be 4 of those towers, and they should be at the corners of the building. And that's why I said it's Aladdin. That's why I say it's Disneyland Mosque, because it's not. It's not right. It's not. If it's blue and then if there's 4 towers, then I would say okay, that's a mosque. All right, that's off. No, you can't do that. Not allowed. Because it's someone else's religion, and you can't do that to other people's religion. This is fantasy. Classic garden. No, it's not. What's classic garden about this? This is purely fantasy. Look, the word classical, has a specific meaning. It's classical Greek and Roman. Like a classic is not just a word. It has a specific time period that it refers to. And they didn't build stuff like this. So this is like a fantasy Mediterranean garden. Fantasy Mediterranean garden. But even then, there's a strange mix of Arabic and medieval. I mean, not medieval. Mediterranean European. So this sort of stuff you might see in Spain or in southern Italy. So when the Islamic Caliphate was expanding, they went around North Africa and they spread over to the Iberian Peninsula to Spain, and they also spread to the south of Italy as well. So what's it called? Sicily and Naples and the south of Spain. So there's kind of Moorish and and Arabic influences in the south of Europe at that time because the Islamic Caliphate was expanding. And especially in Spain, there's this kind of interesting mixture between the Moorish architecture and the local um, Christian. There was also a lot of war and a lot of oppression at that time, so it was not a fun time. It was kind of there was a big religious war going on, but architecturally there was some interesting fusions between the two cultures, and this is a little bit like that. But it's not classic. There's nothing classic about this. If you say like Moorish Iberian garden, that would be plausible. All right, moving on. Nordic church. Medieval manor? Come on, you can't look. Medieval is not a thing you can just vaguely medieval. And it's not even a manor. Like, why would this? Okay, look. The only reason people make roofs that steep is because it snows a lot, right? So it only makes sense in Northern Europe, maybe Russia, but this is not Russia. So Russian or really Northern Europe where it snows a lot, and you need the really steep roof so the snow doesn't sit on the roof, because if too much snow sits on the roof, because snow is heavy, right? If you get enough of it, it's heavy, and then if you have a flat roof, your whole roof just caves in because the snow would collapse your roof. And so when wherever it snows a lot, you have really steep roofs. But steep roofs are difficult to build and difficult to maintain because your roof keeps falling off, because your roof tiles keep falling off because it's so steep. So in places where you don't snow a lot, nobody bothers to build really steep roofs. So this implies that it's either Russian or Scandinavian or somewhere quite far north where it snows a lot. Your floor to ceilings are ridiculous once again. Why is there not another floor here? And then this is not even a space. Ah. Wait, couldn't you fit an attic in here? Why can't you fit an attic in here? What's behind here? Oh. Again, a ladder in the chimney. That's the craziest thing. Alright, well this is somewhere where it snows. Although the color doesn't... The purple doesn't fit anywhere. It should be white, I think, because it will be plaster? It would be plaster, so it would be white. Or even like grey. Not sure where purple comes from. No, purple doesn't really make sense, because purple is not cheap. Like if you think of like colors, you have to think of pigment and how expensive it is. So browns are easy. Brown is just kind of iron oxide and earth. So deep reds, like a deep reddish browns and browns, like in terms of colors, they're easy. Blues are quite expensive, but not, I mean they're kind of expensive, but not too expensive. That's why Islamic mosques are blue. So they're kind of expensive, but not prohibitively so. Purple is really expensive as a dye. Before modern chemistry, purple was really expensive as a dye. Greens and blues. So the cheapest were browns. Greens, blues are more expensive, and then purple are ridiculously expensive. So you wouldn't use purple on a house because you can't afford it. So the colors don't make sense. If it's medieval, no one's that rich. And yeah, it snows. So again, like you're naming, like you're just fudging these names now. These names are you're just completely fudging them. Vaguely Middle Eastern, but the roofs again they're not flat enough. The roofs. Desert dwelling. No, but if it's desert dwelling, why is it sloped? Your roof is still sloped. If it doesn't rain, there's no sloping on the roofs. And there's no overhang. Like, what is the point of the overhang in the desert? The overhang is to keep the rain off. I mean, sometimes you have overhangs to keep the sun off, yes. But it wouldn't be like this. This is not... So what happens in actual desert houses is that it would be thick, massive walls, which you've done, which is good, because the thick, massive walls is to absorb the heat during the day. So the heat, like if you have a giant stone block, it takes a long time for the heat to accumulate and get through to the inside. And ideally, if your wall is thick enough, then the interior of the house never warms up during the day because the walls just absorb all the heat during the day and it releases all the heat again during the nighttime. And so your house remains cool on the inside. It's basically like a cave, but it's built, it's constructed, and so like the walls are thick enough to make sure that the heat of the daytime never gets inside. So that part is right. But what you also have is in a lot of desert structures, the roofs would also be like a living area. So during the night, people might sleep on the roof. So the roof would usually be open. If there are fences, it'll be on the edge of the roof, and there might be like a canopy here, and people might just sleep sleep outside during the night, because the nighttime will be cooler, or at least in the evenings they might just kind of sit on the roof and hang out on the roof because it's cooler there. So the fact that the roof spaces are not used here is unusual because it's a waste of space in terms of living space. And also, not sure why they would be separate like that. In desert cities, often you would have the buildings really close together and also really tall. And what happens with really tall buildings is that they would cast shadows on the street, and so that the streets would be in the shadow, and therefore it would be tolerable to walk around in the streets during the day. So tall buildings close together, and they're close together because you want to minimize the roof, and they're tall because you want to minimize the roof because the sun is right above you, right? So the smaller the roof area, which is also the smaller the footprint of the building, the less area that is exposed to the sun right above. And so when you have tall, narrow buildings, all packed close together, casting shadows on the street and minimizing the amount of space you expose to the sun, that minimizes the heat gain on the interiors of desert houses. So this is not quite right. Not quite right. Like if there's too much surface area exposed to the sun, or there's more surface area exposed to the sun than is necessary. And if you have overhangs to keep the sun away from your walls so you don't heat up the walls, then why would you not have the overhang here as well, right? If you wanted to use that overhang to stop the sun from heating up the walls, then you do that. So this particular one is missing all sorts of architectural technology about passive heating or passive cooling technology. And again, when you take it out of the desert, it doesn't function the way you think it does. Or if you put this in the desert, it doesn't quite function the way you think it would because of the particular climate of the place. Yeah, so this is this is not quite right. Which what cities should you look at? What's a good example of a city? Never mind. I can't think of one. Again, Disney, Indian Mughal architecture, Oriental. No, you look. First of all, this is starting to become racist. You might not realize this, but this is starting to become racist. And it's racist because you're using Oriental to describe a lot of different things. Oriental just means East. It's racist because it's what Europeans use to label everything to the east of them. So everything from like Turkey all the way to Japan is Oriental, and it just means east. So everything east of Europe is Oriental. And so this, what does the Oriental mean? Where is this from? Where do you think this is from? Is it Persian? Is it Indian? It's not Japanese, it's not Chinese, we know that much. So already that part. So if it's Persian but not Japanese, then it's not just Oriental, it's Persian. Right? Is it Persian? Is it in Iraq? Is it in Baghdad? It's not quite in Baghdad because the white stone is not. It's vaguely similar to the Taj Mahal, but then the colors are wrong. So when you use the word Oriental, it becomes racist when you're painting with a broad brush, which is what you're doing now. When you call this what do you call it? Oriental Mausoleum. Yeah, when you say that, it's not because you're trivializing everybody to the east of Europe now, right? Like when I say kind of, yeah, no, because there are a lot of other mausoleums also to the east of Europe, which are nothing like this. Like the mausoleums of Chinese emperors is nothing like this, right? Or the mausoleum of Turkish people are nothing like this. So it is not. You can't do that. You can't. When you say medieval, that's kind of. It's not racist in the sense that medieval is not a race, but even that is kind of like nobody's personally insulted, but it's already wrong because the things you describe as medieval, they're not really medieval. They're like Renaissance fair. They're not actual Renaissance. And now you're using Oriental like this, and this becomes racist. I just wanted you to understand that. I'm not offended myself, but I want people to understand when they see this that you can't push this, because if you push this too far, people will get offended. Like, what is this? Persian. If you say Persian, all right, but let me just type that in. Let me just go into Google image search. Persian mausoleum. How do you spell mausoleum? Persian mausoleum. Interestingly, the Taj Mahal comes up. Alright, Persian mausoleum is the word you're looking for. Don't use the word Oriental, because what does Oriental mean is, what it means is east. Everything to the east of Europe is Oriental, and it should be blue. If it's Persian mausoleum, then it should be blue, white and blue. Alright, there you go. Vaguely Aztec, but it's wrong. Outer, what outer? Who's outer? It's vaguely South American, but the ruins. I'm not sure about the red color. This is like a European attempt at reconstructing a South American, a Mesoamerican place. But the thing about the research into South American ruined cities is that we don't really know what happened there. Like we kind of have clues, but because most of the cities are ruined, and the civilizations are mostly gone and not all that well recorded, we're not entirely sure what happened in these buildings. So we know that, for example, there are pyramids. So this is a pyramid, and it's too small. We know that there are pyramids in kind of South American cities, and we know there are city squares, and we know there are palaces. But aside from that, it's quite difficult to read the ruins or to read the architecture. Mostly because we're not sure about the cultural context, right? Because if you have if you're familiar with the culture, let's say you look at a Greek ruin, you can kind of guess what they were based on what came after, because you know the Greek architecture that exists, and you have written record of what the Greeks did, and you have people like Homer writing about his ancestors, and so because there's some written record from times that are closer to those ruins, so you can kind of interpret those ruins using the other information available to you. But with South America and Central American ruins, that culture is not as well understood, mostly because they didn't have like writing, and so like there's kind of diagrams and drawings and pictures and carvings, or if there is writing, we don't really understand what the writing says. So some of the carvings seem vaguely language-like, but we can't read them because we don't know what they say. So there's no writing describing how people use the buildings, and so we don't really know how to interpret the buildings. And so when you say altar, South American altar, like we don't even know if those pyramids were altars, right? So again, there's this conflating between a fantasy South American architecture with real South American ruins, and Noodler, you're not recognizing in this map that you're doing that. You're not recognizing there's this uncertainty or this kind of vague equivalence between real and fantasy. Like, is that a fantasy Oriental mausoleum, or is it an actual model of a Persian mausoleum? So you're being very vague about this, and this is gonna cause you problems once you talk to somebody who knows their architecture history, because they're gonna be like me. They're gonna be asking these questions like, what do you mean? What do you mean medieval? That's not medieval. Like, what do you mean Oriental? Oriental is everything from Turkey to Japan. Like, what do you mean? So again, like altar. What do you mean altar? How do you know it's an altar? How do you know those Aztec ruins or those Mayan ruins or whatever it is? How do you know they're altars? We know they're pyramids, but that's just the description of the shape of the mound that is left. Or we don't know what they are. So you need to specify what is fiction and what is not. Otherwise, you can get accused of things like racism and like historical errors and things like that, because when you don't specify it's fiction, then people might assume that you're trying to be realistic or you're trying to talk about facts when you're not. Neoclassical, but it's not quite. The colors are wrong, and the shape is wrong. But neoclassical American imperialism. What? Atlantean? Oh, come on, that's just fiction. All right, so let me just. Okay, Atlantean. It's not a real thing. Is it just fiction? Is everything fiction? But the barn is not fiction, is it? Again, what is fiction and what is not? Well, it is fiction, Atlantean. There's nothing really I can say to assess this because it is fiction. It's American neoclassical. Why do I say it's American neoclassical? Because of the scale of it. So classical is the Greeks, right? Classical is the Greeks and the Romans, and they built their temples. Although when it got to the Romans, it became about empire. So for the Greeks, it was religion. Although you might argue that Athens was kind of an empire. But it was mostly religious buildings. But then when it got to the Romans, it became imperial buildings. So the imperial palaces and the, what's it called? The capital. But, and then when it got to neoclassical, so like a revival of classicism, it was, I guess it was in Imperial Europe, and it was in Imperial Europe. So France had neoclassicism, the UK also had neoclassicism, and Europe too. So it became associated with empire and imperial power. And the United States also had that. So if you go to the Capitol and the National Mall, is that what it's called? The National Mall in the United States, you see things that look vaguely like this, but not the green, and not quite that shape. And it became an expression of power after a while. Anyway, Italian urban industrial warehouse. Old Town Depot. Whose town? Whose town? Again, I say it's Italian. It's a storage place. All right, it's a depot. It's a storage house. I say Italian partly because of the color. So this is what's it called? What's this color called? It's is it umber? Sienna. Is this Sienna? Sienna. But there's two. One is the color and one is the town. Siena. Siena is the town. Sienna is the color. So Sienna is the town that became the color because Sienna, the clay around Sienna had a certain amount of iron oxide in it, and that's why the clay is red. And so this reddish clay comes from Sienna, or it became associated with the town of Sienna. And that's why I say it's Italian, because this is Sienna, basically. So if you look at Siena, Sienna, you'll basically find stuff that looks vaguely like this. So I'm just saying, be specific. Be specific. If you have a specific source of inspiration, then be specific. Because if you're vague like this, you open yourself to all sorts of criticism. Because everybody... Well, first of all, if you're vague, you open yourself to misinterpretation. And when people misinterpret your work, then you open yourself to criticism for things that you didn't even do. Like when you say, Old Town Depot, like someone might think of a different town and they say, well, it's not that town. You did it wrong. Right? Like you're wrong because it's not that town. And you're like, no, but I'm thinking of the other town. But because you didn't specify which town, you open yourself up to misinterpretation. So if you have a specific source of inspiration, then use it. And I'm telling you, this is Sienna. So fine. Sienna Workshop. Let's call it that. I don't know what that's meant to be. That's not from anywhere. That's the weirdest mishmash of styles I've ever seen. What is it meant to be? Pioneer Office. No, that's the weirdest mishmash of styles I've ever seen. Like the porch is way too big. Is it supposed to be American? Is it supposed to be American frontier? The proportions are wrong because it should be much shorter than that. It should be much shorter than that if it's American frontier. That's the strangest mishmash of shapes and architectural forms. It's what, a pioneer office? Nope. No, I can't support this. I can't support this. Again, the floor-to-ceilings are way too tall, but in this case, it actually matters even more than the others. Because tall buildings are not trivial things. Like you can't. Like tall buildings are expensive, and so it's like it's a self-contradiction. If it's a pioneer office, if it's meant to be like something on the frontier, then nobody can afford a building this tall on the frontier. On the American frontier, I'm talking about. No, that doesn't make any sense. That doesn't make any sense. Literally makes no sense. Alright, it should be much shorter. Single story. It's a haunted house. Alright, well, this is fiction. Fine, this is fiction. Again, the purple. I'm not sure what it is about the purple. Sure. But there's no spooky, scary skeletons in here. No, you need... Okay, this is... I know what you need. What you need... Here you go. Alright, here you go. What you need is spooky, scary skeletons. Alright, I fixed the architecture for you. Yeah, let me just fix this. Alright, that's fixed. You can thank me later. Let's move on. Suburb 2. The style is a little off. The other one is bungalow. The other suburb one is bungalow. This one, I'm not sure what the style is supposed to be. I'm not sure if it's supposed to be suburbs either. The roof seems too steep for what you're trying to do. Like, if the roof was less steep... Canadian? Canadian suburban? No, even Canadian suburban has flatter roofs than that. I say Canadian because it snows in Canada. Well, maybe Canadian suburban. So because it snows in Canada, the roofs are steeper in Canada. Maybe Canadian suburban, not sure. Whereas the bungalow is American, vaguely Californian suburban, with the shallower roofs. You probably don't even know what bungalow means. Californian suburban is kind of bungalow. It's a rocket ship. It's a wooden rocket ship. Okay, sure. Okay, I guess so. You have to climb up one of the legs. Alright, no comment. No comment. The floor to ceilings are whack again. This is definitely Chinese. There's nothing European about this. This is definitely a weird copy of a European building. Townhouses. Chinese copy of European townhouses is what I think this is. Staircases are off. Your floor to ceilings are way too big. I really think you should reconsider this floor to ceiling business. I think your walls are just too tall. I think you can make it without making it this tall, because I mean, first of all, this should be 2 stories, because there's a door here and there's a window there. That should be 2 stories already. No, the proportions are out of control now. Like it looks really weird, the proportions, because it's too tall. Or maybe it's just not wide enough. Maybe if you have the same height, but it's like twice as wide, it would kind of make sense. No, it's still too tall. It's still too tall either way. I mean, when you get the proportions off like this, it looks weird. And the thing is, this is a video game, right? Minecraft is a video game. And a lot of video games have strange proportions in their architecture because they're trying to fit buildings into a smaller space, because architectural, like gameplay spaces, are often smaller than real spaces. And so trying to squeeze buildings into the smaller space, you often have strange proportions in video games. But it doesn't mean that it's okay to just do it. Like, just because everyone else does it doesn't mean it's okay. And so when you do that, it's maybe it's me, maybe no one else notices, but I notice, right? When you show me this, I notice that the proportions are whack. And yeah, do those have to be that big? Can you not make something very similar in half the height? I think you can make something very similar in half the height. I don't think they need to be that big. Because like those windows are enormous, and then those windows are tiny. Like you see how things don't match? Again, like that can easily be half the height. You can just remove 3 blocks from there and it'll be fine. That should be 2 stories in there. Even if the exterior looks like that should be made into 2 stories on the inside. Old Town Building number 2. Whose town? This is American. I think this is American Northwest. Maybe Boston. Could be old New York as well. Yeah, no. Your floor to ceilings are consistently ridiculous. And I don't think you need to do that. I don't think you need to have floor to ceiling heights that big. Because like, even the proportions of this should be like a 6 or 7 or 8 story building. 6, maybe a 6 story building. Although given that, like, maybe a double height space on the ground and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 above it. It's like a 7 story building. And there's nothing wrong with making that a 7 story building, I don't think. Like, I don't see why that would be a problem. Those proportions are really strange. Style of it, no, but yeah, the style is fine. Again, I would be more specific. I would say Pacific Northwest in the United States. Fiction. A teepee? I appreciate that you tried to make a teepee in Minecraft. That you tried to make a teepee out of 1 meter cube blocks. I appreciate that you made the attempt. I would conclude that you cannot make a convincing teepee in Minecraft out of blocks that are that shape and that size. That's what I would conclude. Like, entirely not your fault, and I respect you for trying. But entirely not your fault, it doesn't work in Minecraft. Because you know what a TV is. I know what a TV is. A TV is a tent. And it's not a very big tent either. And you can't make a tent out of solid 1 meter cube blocks. but I do respect you for trying. Alright, let's move on. You trying to make a TP in Minecraft out of blocks? Alright. A pioneer shop. No, but there's no... The colors are too bright. The colors are too bright. They can't afford those colors back then. Like, that neon green is a synthetic color. Like, there's no natural pigment that can make that green. Maybe you should just look up paint technology. That green is only possible with modern chemistry. And during whatever pioneer era you think this is from, they didn't have that paint technology. Even that red is probably too bright. Aside from that, again, I think it's too tall. Is it just me, or is that too... I think that's too tall. That should be like a 4-story building. It just looks wrong to me. The proportions of it, like everything else is fine. Like the detailing, the colors, except for the bright green and red. I'm not sure about that one, but the stuff behind it, like the detailing is good. It's only the proportions. I don't know why you make things taller than they really are. I mean, I know bigger is more impressive, but I don't think that's really justification for making something that's just not plausible. It's too tall. Isn't it? No, yeah, it is. It's too tall. It's too tall in a way that makes it not plausible. Like if we move that down 2 blocks, down to there. If we move maybe that down 1 block, move those down 2 blocks, and then like lower that by 2 blocks. And so the whole building, if it's like that big, so the very top, like half the height of it, so that it's that big, that would actually make it more believable. Well, not quite half, but including the parapet. That's a parapet, right? Yeah, that's just a parapet. So including the parapet, it should be that tall. But move that down 2 blocks, move that down 1 block. That would make it more plausible. Because like from a distance, I don't know what that is. Because you say it's a pioneer thing, but it's too tall for a pioneer thing, so I don't know what it is. Because if it's a pioneer thing, I would expect it to be more this shape. Like even if it's single story, I would expect it to look like that. Because the pioneers, they were poor. They didn't really have a lot of resources or money. It's like not like they were rolling in cash. So they didn't build impressive buildings. Like bigger is more impressive, but then more impressive doesn't make any sense in the pioneer context. Right? Is that a giant chicken? That's a giant chicken, isn't it? Amazing. A giant chicken house. Chicken coop. Can we build our KFCs like this? So, postmodernism. Scott Brown, is this going, or is it someone else? Learning from Las Vegas. Learning from Las Vegas is Denise Scott Brown and Robert Venturi. Although it is said that Denise Scott Brown, who is Robert Venturi's wife, actually did most of the work. Learning from Las Vegas is a book that it was quite influential at the start of the postmodern age, and so it was pushback against modernism. And so modernism, as I said earlier, advocated for this international style, which the criticism being that there's no identity and no no individuality, no culture, right? Because everything looked the same. And so the postmodernists, in attempting to recover identity, so Robert Venturi and Denise Scott Brown and apparently Stephen Eisenhower, together they wrote this book about learning from Las Vegas. Las Vegas, you know what Las Vegas is the gambling city with casinos. And so the casinos compete with each other by building for themselves identities, right? And so there's like pyramids and giant hotels and bright lights and signs and everything. And so learning from Las Vegas is about how to, or like strategies for putting identities into architecture. And and they talk about the duck and the shed. The duck being literally a building in the shape of a duck, which gave it identity. It's a duck house. Or the shed being that the house itself has no identity, it's just a shed. But next to the shed, there's a giant sign, and the sign gives the shed identity by pointing out what it is. So what this is a bit of both. I mean, the chicken is a kind of a sign, but the chicken is also a giant chicken. And so in identifying this as a chicken coop, you put a giant chicken on it. And so everyone can see from a distance that it's a chicken house, because literally chicken house, right? So this is postmodernism, and also the start of what we would today call as ironic hipsterism, because this is kind of ironic hipsterism, right? It's a chicken house, get it? And so postmodernism has gradually evolved into hipsterism, which is unfortunate in my view. But this is where it started. So it's the pushback against modernism and pushback against globalization. And hipsterism is also pushback against globalization. You know, it's like people trying to create for themselves an identity that's counterculture and you know, it's a non-mainstream kind of culture. So this is where all this kind of started. So this is a very interesting essay, a very interesting visual essay on postmodernism. Even if you don't realize it, Noodlor, you have in fact created an interesting theoretical thesis on postmodernism. Either that or you're a hipster, which I don't know which one you prefer. Do we look inside? Is there anything funny inside? Well, I mean, come on, you know what's going on here. Well, how can you? There you go. All right. It's a farm patch. Although not particularly efficient. In fact, rather inefficient, because you have, is that a well? Is that meant to be a well? You have to walk through the food to get to the well. Aside from that, it's fine, it's a farm. The problem with putting a well in the middle of the farm is that people go to the well a lot. If you imagine a time when your only water source is the well, so every single day somebody in your household has to go out to the well and get like 2 buckets of water, otherwise you have no water in the house. So there's like one well in the middle of the town, and everybody in the town every single day goes to the well to get several buckets of water. So the well is like one of the most popular places in the town because everybody needs water. So you can't put the well in the middle of your farm, in the middle of your crops, because everybody's gonna walk all over your wheat and your carrots if it's in the middle of your farm. So the well, the town well, is usually in a central part of the town, and it's usually kind of in an open space and it's paved so that people can easily access it. So there's that. So having a well in the middle of a farm is slightly odd. But aside from that, alright, it's a farm. What's it called? Homestead. Nordic farmstead. Why is it Nordic? What's Nordic about it? I mean, it's a farmstead. Alright, I get it. But what's Nordic about it? It could be any sort of farmstead, couldn't it? Why couldn't it be American Frontier Farmstead? Why is it Nordic? What's Nordic about it? I don't know what's Nordic about it. Strangely specific. Strangely, why is it a Nordic farmstead and not something else? Because I mean, back there you're talking about Oriental Mausoleum, which is really not specific. And then here you specify Nordic, which is too specific. Well, I mean, it's not too. I mean, if you say it's Nordic, it's fine. It's fine, and I don't have a problem with that. But why is it so specific here and so not specific over there? That is that South Korea? It's hypermodernism. I mean, the numbers on the buildings, it's hypermodernism. Could be South Korea. Brutalist towers. I'm not sure if it's brutalist anymore. Once you put colors on it, it's not really brutalist anymore. No, I don't think this is brutalist. I would call this like hypermodern. Is that a thing? Hypermodern. Kind of. it's interesting. Alright, well you can type that into your Google if you want. Not sure if brutalist. I mean, it could be, but it's too colorful. Somebody's taken a brutalist building and painted it to make it less brutalist. Also wooden floors. Not sure if wooden floors aren't brutalist, come on. We need more concrete. More concrete. More brutal. Oh, it's 5 on this side. It's 2 on the other side, but it's 5 on this side. Fascinating. And it's a backwards 1. So this kind of minimalist modernism is not that complicated, right? It's just big concrete shapes, and that's about it. That's just your fairly standard modern office tower. Brutalist pagoda, that doesn't even make any sense. A brutalist pagoda? You're reaching a little bit there. You're reaching a little bit there. Maybe you might convince some of your clients to believe that. It's a curious fusion. It's a curious fusion because, well, this is what some of the postmodernism became, right? So modernism is this international style where everything looks the same. But then, in recovering identity and culture, architects would take existing construction technologies like concrete and glass, like this concrete and glass, and they would try to reinterpret the shapes into something that is inspired by the local culture. So one of the examples of this is Taipei. Is it Taipei 101? Is that what it's called? Hold on, let me just type that into Google image search. Taipei 101 is in Taipei. And so that is like a modernist pagoda. If you just kind of type that, Taipei 101 is the thing you should look up. So it's a steel and glass skyscraper, but then they made the shape of it resemble a pagoda a little bit. So it's using modernist building construction methods, but adding a little postmodern twist to the design of it, to the shape of it, to make it slightly Asian, because it's in Taiwan. So that's what postmodernism became in some instances. And a lot of other skyscrapers have that, because skyscrapers have been built everywhere around the world. And so if you look at the Burj Khalifa, or what's it called now? Is it called Burj Dubai? What's it called? The tallest building in the world. And then you look at other towers as well. The Petronas Towers in, where is it? Is it in Indonesia? So you look at the Petronas Towers, and you look at the Burj Khalifa, and Taipei 101. So there's all these kind of big, giant, modern towers, but the shapes of it, and the plans, and the elevations of them takes a little bit of inspiration from the local culture, and that's how they kind of try to reintroduce a little bit of uniqueness back into modernism. Whether or not you think that works is, that's something that you can argue, but it's interesting. It's interesting. So instead of just having a straight rectangular tower, they kind of put a little shape in. And this is kind of what you've done is this kind of, I wouldn't call it brutalist pagoda. I would call it like a modernist, postmodern, pagoda maybe. Sure. And again, like whether you believe that is successful in reclaiming identity from modernism, that is again debatable. But it creates a little bit of interesting shapes in your cities. Right? Right. Alright, so let's go to the next one. No. Your floor to ceilings are more reasonable in this building too. So I appreciate that. What is that? Is that China again? Is that a weird Chinese copy? I think it's meant to be Middle Eastern fantasy Baghdad Golden Age bookshop. Desert Bazaar. See, this is Aladdin, but this like it's fantasy though. It's not real. It's like fantasy Desert Bazaar more than real Desert Bazaar. So that's why I said, what did I say? Fantasy bag. How do you spell Baghdad? But I can't. I'm so bad. Baghdad. Baghdad. Alright, I thought so. Baghdad Golden Age, which is fictional. It's not real. I mean, there kind of was a Baghdad Golden Age, but a lot of what is known about it is fictional. Baghdad, oops, Golden Age bookstore. Fantasy Baghdad Golden Age bookstore. It's kind of specific, isn't it? I mean, I'm not gonna complain too much about it. But what I would say is be careful conflating Disney's Aladdin with real Middle East, is what I would say. It's like, is it really a desert bazaar? I don't think so. I don't think desert bazaars look like this. You just type that into Google. No, not quite. Not the real ones. The real ones don't quite look like this. I mean, there's a lot of video game desert bazaars. But again, like the reality is kind of different. And you're not specifying what's fictional and what's real. So that's... I mean, if we take all of these to be fictional, then there's not much for me to say, because if it's fictional, you can just make up whatever you want. It's only if you're basing it on something real that I can bring the architectural knowledge that I have to the discussion, right? A lighthouse. Sure, if you say so. I'm not sure about. No, yeah, okay, yeah, lighthouse. All right, lighthouse. But again, like you don't say where the lighthouse is. Lighthouse, it could be anywhere around the Atlantic, I think. Well, no, North Atlantic. Vaguely American. Probably kind of old American Northwest again. Right. Nope, not much else to say about it. Why is it not circular? I know circular things are difficult in Minecraft, but lighthouses often are circular. Because they have to withstand storms, right? So if there's like a hurricane, they have to stand up after the hurricane. So the circular shape of it allows the wind to flow past it with less resistance. A greenhouse. But whose greenhouse and where is it from? It's not a modern greenhouse, right? Because maybe you meant for it to be a modern greenhouse, but the fact that there's the really thick structure makes it look more like a 19th century greenhouse. So before there was a lot of steel structure, because nowadays a greenhouse is just kind of steel frame with glass, and the steel is kind of thin because it's efficient that way. But back before steel technology became that advanced, they would be like stone or wooden buildings with a lot of glass on the roofs and things. And then this is what it looks like. This looks more like a 19th. Let me just look at this in the Google again. 19th century greenhouse. Yeah, yeah, 19th century greenhouse is what this looks more like. So like the structure is less efficient, and so there's more structure and less glass than in a modern greenhouse, which is kind of what this is like. Like there's more structure than in a modern greenhouse. Right. No, it's fine. Like I don't really have much else to say about it. What is this supposed to be? Northern Chinese. Qing Dynasty Northern Chinese guard tower. Mountain monastery? No. 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 You are, I mean, kind of. Kind of, but the problem you're running into is that a monastery is like a city. Especially if you're talking about a mountain monastery, which I think you mean Tibetan monastery. But a monastery, you have to understand, has a lot of people in it. A monastery is not like a house. A monastery is like a giant university with thousands of little monks trying to learn how to be a monk. So a monastery is huge. It's like it's like a mix between a city and a fortress and a university is what a monastery is. And this is like monasteries. They often have they often are arranged like like a fortress. They're arranged like a fortress because they're in the mountain and well, first of all, you have to protect yourself against the elements, but you kind of also have to protect yourself against bandits and invasions because like monasteries, you have to understand that religions are not always peaceful. Like the religions, they have their own hierarchy, they own their own land, and they sometimes they have like serfs and peasants that work for them, kind of like slaves. So religions also were power structures, and so they were also landowners. And so then, so-called monasteries were also fortresses. Like when you're in a theocracy where your monks hold political power, then you are literally the lord. Like you're your theocracy, and so you're the feudal lord as well. And this is a tower. This is not a monastery. So this is why I said it's like a watchtower, because this is what it looks like, a watchtower. You can't fit a monastery in a space this small. So there you go. So the proportions are wrong because it's just not the right size. A monastery is like at least it's like a town. Because what's a monastery? A monastery is a place where a lot of monks live. And just like a place where a lot of people live, it's a town. It's a town. And often it's a fortified town, is what a monastery is. And what you've built here is not a fortified town. So this might be like one tower in that monastery. And vaguely oriental things with not much research done. So again, you're running into the danger of being racist because you claim to be a thing, but you haven't done enough to be authentic about it, which is a risk you take, right? And again, like when you say monastery, now it's about religion as well. So again, you're walking into controversial territory because once you talk about a monastery, like is it a fiction? Is it a fiction mountain monastery? If it is, then you should say that. But even if you say it's fiction, it's clearly inspired by something vaguely Asian, probably Tibetan. And like you run into trouble if you skirt around the edge of these controversial things and you use them, but you don't use them in a way that is respectful and you don't use them in a way that is clear and you kind of just fudge it a little bit and kind of you're not very specific about things, then you open yourself into all sorts of criticisms because you're not treating this as seriously as you should. Or like you're not taking it as seriously as everyone else is, and so everyone else is going to be angry at you when you do something like this. It's like yeah, like you can run into a lot of problems. Like if I like if I say, oh, I'm building a Christian temple, and then maybe I put the cross upside down, that's meaningful. Like that's not a trivial thing. That's gonna piss people off. So like you can't just do something, but get it a little wrong, and just walk away thinking you'll be okay. Like you can't do that. So if I have a cathedral and I get it a little bit wrong, but in a way that other people interpret as insulting, I'll get in trouble for that. So you know when you say, oh, it's a mountain monastery, no, this is stuff that people will care about. And if you get it wrong, people will care about it. Right? It's just like Oriental mausoleum. People will care about it. Or whatever it is, like classic temple. And you get that one. Well, I guess like the ancient Greeks aren't there anymore. Nobody really worships Athena or Zeus or whoever it is. So I mean, if it's historical, I guess it's less problematic. But like the Oriental mosque, and you got that wrong. You don't have the four minarets and the colors are wrong. Like people will get insulted. Like minarets again, they are significant. Like they're meaningful. There's meanings to them, and if you get it wrong, you can insult people. So I'm just saying, you need to be when you start doing this sort of stuff, you need to like do a lot of research and try to make sure you get it right. Like you can't just suggest something and just kind of vaguely do something and fudge it and then think you can walk away with it. It's not that easy, right? It's not that easy. Longship, longboat. Nordic longship. Well, I mean, only the Nords have longships. I don't think you need to specify Nordic longship because longship is always Nordic. Also, your longship is not long enough. I mean, the front is correct, the end is correct, the middle is correct, but they call it a longship because it's long. Like it should be about 3 times as long. Again, you've chosen this square to build on, and you're getting into trouble. You're getting into trouble a lot, to be honest. A lot of these structures are weird and incomprehensible because you're trying to squeeze them into that shape. Yeah, it should be like 3 times that length. Or is that a graveyard? Graveyard. Whose graveyard? Vaguely European. Why is this guy's head on the ground though? Vaguely European. Also could be American. What is that supposed to be? That's not a real thing. Oriental Academy. No, 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 you can't. You can't do that. Academy is a Greek. It's a word with Greek origin. Um, Islamic schools are called. I forgot the word. Crap. I know this. I forgot the word. Islamic school. Hold on. Let me just try and figure this out. An Islamic school. Madrasa. A madrasa. But a madrasa, that's not what a madrasa looks like. Madrasa, they usually have a courtyard. They usually are a courtyard, and of course there's like classrooms. A madrasa, hold on, let me just spell it for you. Madrasa is what you should look up, and like this is again, you can't do this. You can't. It's vaguely right, but it's also not anywhere near right. The problem you're doing, like what you're getting into now is you're just building the shape using a certain set of materials that aren't even authentic because the purple is not authentic. It's blue is what you need. But you're just using the set of materials and just building these kind of shapes and just calling it a thing when it's not. Like a madrasa is a specific thing, and you need to do a lot more research into it if you want to try and do it. That's a statue. Desert Sphinx. Well, the Sphinx is only from Egypt, so it's like you don't really need to specify a desert Sphinx. That house is too fancy. Why is there a fence above there? So the old cottages, it's vaguely like a cottage, but it's kind of too big for a cottage. The fact that there's a balcony on the second floor is not very cottage-like. But aside from that, it's a cottage. Yeah, it's a cottage. I'm not sure about balcony. Not sure about balcony, but aside from that, it's fairly cottage-like. Cottage by definition is small. Smaller than this, probably shorter than this. Like cottage are supposed to be small and humble. Nordic Cathedral. Nordic Temple. Close enough. Nothing on the interior though. Not sure about that one. I think there might be more structure on the inside, but there's not much space for it, so maybe I don't not too concerned about it. I think on the interior, you can like use fences to put a bit more structure on the interior. Yeah, I think there needs to be more structure on the interior. Other than that, good enough, decent enough. All right. That is, I don't know what that is. Fantasy. Inferno. What does that even mean? I mean, it's fiction. What does that even mean? No comments. A giant pumpkin. No comment on a giant pumpkin. Why is it not glowstone though? Yeah, it's a pumpkin. I get it. But shouldn't there be like a light coming out of the eye sockets or something for extra spooky? Wait, there's a door. He's kind of sad on the inside, isn't he? I would have glowstone the eyes or something for extra spooky. Malaysian resort. Nippon house. Nope. Malaysian resort. This is no. Japanese. Well, I'm just gonna go to Google. Japanese house historic. No, not even close. Not even close to a historic Japanese house. There's not the exterior columns as such. The balcony on the outside is too prominent. The climate of Japan does not require the overhang like that. So the what do you call it? The crap, what's it called? I'm blanking. Maybe I've been doing this for too long. So the overhang, you use it in hot, humid climates because you want to keep the sun off your walls to stop your house from heating up, but you want to expose the walls to air currents. So if there's wind, you want to use the wind to cool your house. And so this, I forgot what it's called. So that's why I said Malaysian resort is because this is more South Asian architecture. Like this particular adaptation, the wide overhangs, the particular adaptation of wide overhangs is required in tropical or subtropical climates. It's not really necessary up in Japan, which is far enough north to not need that for the most part. Veranda. A veranda is what it's called. So the veranda is a tropical adaptation. VE, so veranda is it's a tropical adaptation, and you don't have that sort of thing in Japan because you don't need it. So you can read architecture if you know what you're doing. So if you know your architecture history, you can read it. Bangladeshi adaptation to climate change and sea level rise. I'm being facetious, but this could be Bangladeshi adaptation to sea level rise. Stilt shack. I mean, okay, it is a stilt shack, but I'm just saying that it's also adaptation to sea level rise. Maybe if the entire house was a boathouse is adaptation to sea level rise. The house itself is kind of small, but you see, like a stilt shack is a thing that you would find in the tropics again. And so here, that makes sense. So you see the massive veranda, that makes sense there for this house. Not so much for the Japanese, if it's meant to be Japanese. See, and I think it's more Malaysian. Let me just go type in Malaysian resort into Google and see what that shows us. Malaysian resort. Yeah. No, no, really, it's more similar to Malaysian resort than Japanese house. Tree houses. All right. Tree pods. Sure. Not sure about the ladder. I understand it's Minecraft, and so ramps are difficult. I think I prefer ramps if possible. But again, it's Minecraft, so it's kind of hard to have ramps. And you also have chosen a small footprint. Because, well, you can't even get past the first pod. What a scam! How do you get up there? You can't get up. Okay, get up. Alright, so this one you can get up. Okay. I think there's circulation problems. I would prefer ramps. I don't know if you can manage to do ramps. It's kind of difficult, but I'll be more impressed if there were ramps. Alright, tree pods. Is that another haunted house? Why do you have two haunted houses? Haunted chapel. Should people be insulted by this? Haunted chapel? A chapel is a religious building, and you're messing with people's religions. So I don't know. Also, that's kind of too complex for a chapel, isn't it? That seems a little complex for a chapel. It could be a Russian chapel. No, Russian chapel is a very specific thing. Not quite Russian. Eastern Orthodox a little bit. I'm not sure about the complexity of it. Chapels usually are small and simple. Pioneer camp. Alright, so again you're trying to build tents with giant blocks of wool, which is ambitious. Your thick walls leaves you with only a tiny little space on the inside. Yeah, well, I mean, that's Minecraft, that's not your fault. Um, Cantilevering blocks. Interesting. Not very economical in terms of the amount of floor space you get. What do you call this? Cubist. That's not what cubism is. That's not what cubism means. No, that's not what cubism means. Cubism is Cubist architecture is not really a thing. And cubism as painting or as sculpture is something completely different. I mean, it's kind of interesting what you've done here. But it's not a real thing. Alright, we're out. Structurally dubious. Probably needs columns on the corners. Yeah, like everything in Minecraft is cubist, am I right? Everything is cubes. Bastardized classical temple. Classic forum. No, it's not. It's not. This is not. No, no, no. Forum. A forum is more than this. A forum is like a courtyard house or courtyard building. There needs to be like actual roofed parts on the sides of it. Because a forum is not just a space. Roman Forum. Well, I mean, the actual Roman Forum is dismantled. Reconstruction. Yeah, it's actually like roofed. The actual Roman Forum is like a government building. It's like a debate hall. It's not just an empty space. Unless you're saying like Forum ruins. If you're saying classic Forum ruins and then the roof is gone, then that kind of makes sense. Yeah, no, it's a building. It's an actual building with a roof, is what a forum is. What is that meant to be? Come on. That's just silly now. Old Town Arch. There's a giant statue on top. So the Triumphal Arch was a Roman thing during the Roman Empire. It wasn't even an early Roman thing. The Roman Empire. So there's like triumphal columns, triumphal arch. Every time an emperor wins a big war, they would build a thing to memorialize the victory. And the arch got adopted by other people. So there's the arch in Paris, and then there's like the Brandenburg Gate in Germany. And so these kind of really monumental things as pieces of architecture to memorialize an event started, I guess, with the Romans. But the Romans, like, part of what they would do is they would steal bits of architecture from other people that they conquer. So they would conquer Egypt and then like take columns from Egypt and put it into Rome. They'll take pieces of other people's cities and put them in Rome for decoration. Because that's what the Romans did, right? They just went around and conquering people and taking their stuff. Old Town Arch, that's kind of weird, putting a giant statue on top of that. I don't think any particular town did that. But, you know, some towns have like memorial arches too. In the grand tradition of Romans stealing other people's bits of architecture. So like arches as memorials. What is that? Radio tower? Sure. Radio tower. Not much to say. So radio towers, functionally, I mean, they have to function, and so they're more. In terms of design, they're often not very. And you keep doing this. You keep having no structure in the corners of your buildings. Alright, there's a tower. I don't think we can get up there. I'm actually I'm a fan of functional architecture, like infrastructural architecture. It's like bridges and radio towers, because there's a very clear logic to them, right? Because they have to function. And usually there's not enough money to make them decorative. And so things like the Golden Gate Bridge, for example, is it's just engineering. So I'm into that sort of thing too, infrastructure. And a radio tower is kind of like that. It's a tower with a radio dish on it, or a lot of radio dishes on it. So it just has to function. A festival tent. You keep trying to build tents with giant blocks of wool. Alright, not much to say about this one. It's a tent. Is that Falling Water? Is that supposed to be a copy of Falling Water? Modernist, yes! You correctly identified modernism. It's vaguely Falling Water. Le Corbusier would be proud, but you don't. No, you need columns on the inside. Okay, here's the thing. What did he call it? Le Corbusier, like the guy, one of the main inventors, I guess you would say, of modernism. So he was the guy who came up with this idea of like separating the structure from the space. So like imagine, let me just do this white wall. So the model, so let's say like this is the floor. I forgot what it's called. So the columns would do this, and then the floor above that. So to achieve this kind of open horizontalness of modernism, he proposed this sort of structure where you pull the columns in from the corners, and then you put the floors on the columns like that. And that's how you end up with this kind of these clean horizontal lines on the outside of the building by putting the columns on the inside, right? So then you have these strong horizontal lines at each floor. And this is what you kind of copied here. So you have these kind of strong horizontal lines at each floor. The problem you've made is that you haven't put the columns on the inside. You've put the strong horizontal lines and the cantilevers. I mean, that's pretty cool, cantilevers. But what you really need is columns on the inside pulled back from the walls, but you still need columns because you can't have a house without columns. That's just crazy, right? So you're missing a bunch of columns. But aside from that, you've got most of it right. Yeah, you've got most of it right. Most of it, just the columns are missing. Other than that, it's a pretty good modernist house. I like this. It's well done. Well done, not only do I like it, but it's also accurate. Architecturally accurate. Some of the other stuff, not so much, but this one is pretty good. I just want to avoid this one. What is it? Oriental Garden. No. I don't want to be so negative, but no. So even Islamic garden design is very specific. Like there's a certain mathematical formula for it, and you're completely missing it. Maybe you should just find a book on Islamic architecture and just read. You might find it really interesting, and you might learn a lot. I think you would. Maybe just go type in Islamic garden into Google. Yeah, no, there's a very specific geometry to Islamic gardens, and it's not like it's not an accident how those gardens are designed. Um, I think you should I think you should find a book on Islamic architecture. Islamic architecture, Islamic gardens, although a good architecture book will include gardens, and just read about it. I like this. That's the part that I think you're really missing a lot of the details, or missing a lot of the important aspects that are not obvious to people who don't know about it. But I mean, look, if you're interested in architecture, I think you should do it. Go find a book on Islamic architecture and read. That's my biggest advice to you, I think. And I think you'll find it very interesting, and I think you'll learn a lot. Um, uh, Early industrial era warehouse. Medieval workshop. No. No, man. No, you can't. Medieval is not what. It's not that. Cranes? That's not medieval. you you really need to separate fantasy from reality. This is early industrial warehouse. Especially that crane tells me that it's early industrial. Uh, I mean because like certain technologies were not used in certain times in history. The the cathedral, the Duomo in Florence, building the dome on the Duomo was a huge technological achievement at the time. because during the medieval era, their engineering was just not advanced. Like whatever what the Romans did, they forgot all of that. And in the medieval era, like the engineering skills were pretty bad. And the fact that they managed to build a dome on the Florence Cathedral was like the start of the Renaissance, because it was the Renaissance was the renewal, was the recovery of all these things that they lost from the Roman era. So from the Roman era up until the Renaissance, it was like this huge backwards slide in terms of technology and science. And so the Renaissance was the recovery of those sciences. And cranes is one of these pieces of technology that were not really used in the medieval era, or they were, but they weren't very advanced. Like they were quite primitive. So you can't do this and call it medieval workshop, because it's historically not correct. Let me just type in early industrial warehouse into Google. Okay, that doesn't come up with what I was hoping, because it doesn't actually. Early industrial revolution warehouse. Alright, that's more like it. Yeah. Anyway. Medieval is not what you think it is. Maybe you should do that too. Get a book on just architectural history. Just get a book on architectural history, general architectural history, but maybe specifically like Renaissance, like medieval architecture, Renaissance architecture, and just read about it. And just that will like put a lot of things into context for you, I think. What is this? Mexican resort. Pueblo. All right, close enough. So mostly it's the materials and the colors, and the red earth is it's accurate. Not sure if the function is correct. I mean, there's no furniture, there's no real interiors. It's correct enough. It's correct enough. I mean, there's no interior, so we don't judge it too much. What is that meant to be? There's a sail on a building, or what's gonna happen? The building's gonna sail away. Pirate hideout. I'm not even gonna comment on this because this is just fiction. Pirates. Where's the booty? Where's the pirate booty? There's no booty? There's no... I'm not gonna comment except to say, where's your booty? Okay, that's all I have to say. Ice Cathedral. Although, ice buildings are actual things. Ice Palace. Well, I mean, it's not really a palace because it's kind of small. But ice buildings are a thing. So, ice hotels. Where do they do it? Do they do it in Canada, or do they only do it in Scandinavia? Ice hotel. So it's like they build these structures out of ice every winter, and then they melt in summer. And yeah, so they don't last forever. They melt after a while. But they're kind of cool. So they're like these ice buildings that you can live in, or you can visit them during the winter. Where are they? Ice hotels. Sweden? Alright, Sweden. Yeah, so those are cool. Although not as tall though. Ice is a fairly good construction material, surprisingly very strong construction material. I mean, of course, the only problem is that it melts if the temperatures warm up. So the Native Americans, the Inuit people, built igloos, and they're perfectly functional buildings. So as long as the ice stays solid, ice is actually a very good building material. It's like a really good building material. Strong, easy to work with, right? You just apply heat and you can shape it however you like. It's like a really good building material, except it melts. So ice hotels are surprisingly functional and like quite beautiful as well. Not that tall though. Ice hotels don't manage to be that tall because although ice is quite good, it's more of a compression material like concrete or like bricks. So having like really tall and thin structures is not ideal. More reliable is compression structures like arches and vaults, and domes. So which I mean igloos are like domes. So compression type structures. In fact, like the real ice hotels are more interesting than your little piece here. You should look that up, ice hotels. And then mushroom house, because mushrooms. Yeah, mushroom dwelling, sure, but why isn't the whole thing mushrooms? Why is there wood? Would it not be? Would it not make more sense if the whole thing was mushrooms? Like the whole thing was this stuff? Alright, so there we go, there's all your buildings. So that was an interesting tour. Highly recommend you find a book on Islamic architecture and read through it. Not just look at the pictures, but read through it. And aside from that, alright, quite interesting, quite interesting. But all of this is taken out of context, and all of it is at different scales because you're squeezing a lot of different buildings into the same footprints, and so they're all at different scales. I understand you call it a sketchbook, but as somebody who is trained to design real buildings, the fact that there's no context and the fact that it's all different scales and all that, like it bothers me because this is all the kind of it's all the kind of stuff that you are taught not to do. Like you're taught not to ignore context because it's important what other buildings are around your building, right? You're taught not to fudge the proportions, and you're taught not to fudge the scale because if you build a real building, if things are too big or too small, it really matters. And so all of these things are things that I've been taught for years and years not to do, and you've done a lot of them in this. But this is not real architecture. It's a sketchbook, and so in that sense, I'm. But like if you're taught to be an architect, even in your sketchbook, you would make the proportions right. You know what I mean? Like and if you make a sketch of a building, you'd also put in a bit of the landscape around it because it's just what you do to make good architecture. Like you can't just if you're sketching a house, you don't just sketch the house. You would also sketch like the horizon. You sketch whatever's around the house, and you like put some clouds in the sky, just to make it proper. So a lot of the things you've done here is not proper, and it's not conducive to good design. I'm not saying like your designs are bad. I'm just saying that if you take things in isolation, or like if you're a real architect, you design a house in isolation and you just put it into a city without any regard to what's in the context, that's gonna be a bad design, probably, because you've ignored the context. So it's just stuff that we are taught not to do as architecture students. So what else should I say? I think that's about it. It's been a pretty long video, and I have talked about a lot of things. Scale, I don't know if you care. I don't know if you care about scale and proportion. But like I care because I've been I've been to architecture school, and scale and proportion is a big deal. I don't know if you care enough to just kind of think a lot more carefully about the sizes of things in relation to the human body. It's the sort of thing that matters a lot in real architecture, and it doesn't matter at all in video games, right? In a lot of video games, the scales and proportions are completely off. Um, yeah, but it's important if you're interested in real buildings. All right, I think I'll end it here. Don't think there's too much more we need to say. It's been interesting. It's been very interesting looking through this stuff. All right. If anybody else wants me to look at your builds and respond and maybe answer questions, feel free to send me a message on YouTube or wherever else you find me, and give me a link to your world or a download file, and I can do that because this is Minecraft Design School, and we're here to learn about architecture through Minecraft. All right, I'll see you all in the next video, whenever that is. Whenever somebody sends something in, I'll see you.